Welcome to the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Barton. Today I'm talking with Chad Boudreau from the Comic Readers. It's a local comic book store located in the heart of downtown Regina. Me personally, I've been going to Comic Readers for well over 20 years to pick up comic books, graphic novels, board games, and Chad has kind of been my Buddha. He's been making recommendations for new books for me for years and finding new gems that he can slide into my subscription folder and just kind of guiding me along the way to finding really great stories and really great books. Chad, welcome.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be here. Thanks for inviting me out. I didn't realize that you actually were at Comic Readers for that long. You've actually been at Comic Readers longer than I have been.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I only moved to the city in 1998.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say that, as soon as I could get on my bicycle and go to the comic book store in the South End, I was there.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that bit of history.
So before we get talking about comic books, let's talk about beer.
I like it. I like comics and I like beer, so let's go.
So this one today we're drinking is Rebellion's Golden Crush. So it's a 4.5% ABV. It's an IPA, but it's a session IPA. So you're not going to get sloshed after one or two pints.
Yeah, I'm halfway through a cup here, and I've been enjoying it. It's nice and cold. I like my beer cold, especially in the summer.
Crisp and cold?
Crisp and cold for sure. Interestingly, as you age, you have a more discerning taste for beer, the more beer you explore. And I have to say, IPA has never been a favorite of mine when I was younger. Not that I'm an old man, but certainly in the last, since we moved to Regina and got exposed to microbreweries and all sorts of different types of beers from the province and from other provinces, IPAs have really found their way into my heart. I think they are a delicious experience. And I'm enjoying this one very much.
What are you getting out of it?
Man, so my beer terminology is probably not all that robust. But
go with what you know.
With what I know, I'm going to take one more sip here, and I'm going to tell you what happens. So, and I think I've always experienced this with IPAs, and maybe I've learned to appreciate it over time. But when cold beer hits my mouth, I initially experience the cold, especially on a hot day. If you're outside, or if you're on a patio, or even if you're looking at the sun, that coldness is just fantastic. It's just such a great experience. And then with IPAs, and I'm finding it with this one, I think the term is hoppiness of an IPA. It hits you in stages. So I think as it rolls to the back of my tongue and then down my throat, you get initial blast of hoppiness, and then it lingers. And I think initially that isn't what I enjoyed. I didn't like the lingering taste of an IPA, but I've grown to appreciate it. It's almost like you enjoy a beer longer when there is all of these different, when the taste hangs around, and especially when it's a good taste. So that's what I experience. I'll have another sip. I don't think there's a fruitiness in there, but there's something that reminds me of something citrusy.
Sure.
So tell me about that. Is there something going on? Why am I thinking that?
You're hitting the nail right on the head. I think when people drink this, they should immediately smell it. Smell it before they drink it.
Okay.
You take in the aroma, the aromatic characteristic of the beer.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to be looking for is those bright, crisp citrus notes. I find the flavor itself is really complemented by the aroma.
Okay.
And like you said, the finish, it's got a long lingering finish, and I would describe it maybe more hoppy and dank.
Dank's such a negative word. Basements are dank.
We're taking dank back.
Okay.
Well, as you may know, hops are in the same family as marijuana.
Okay.
So sometimes when the guys are brewing with a blend of particular hops, it kind of smells a little bit like marijuana.
Really?
The resin or the dank quality of the hops can affect the beer in a way that is reminiscent of the characteristic of dank.
So when I think of dank, I think of moisture.
wet, musty basement.
So is that what's going on in a hop?
We're redefining dank in
Okay.
this situation.
Okay.
More like it's dank,
Okay.
as opposed to it's dank.
Okay. Fair enough. All right.
It's our number one seasonal seller. Last year and the year before, people went nuts for it. Our current batch, I don't know if I told you this, it sold out in 5 minutes.
You did tell me that. Yeah. It's amazing.
Our sales staff sent out the email for the order, and it just, boom, the email exploded, and people were like, I want it all.
Nice. So where does the citrus notes come from?
Definitely from the hops.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember what Dave used, but I know this formulation of the recipe is using a new type of hops that he brought in specifically for this. He's been thinking and planning about this all year.
Okay. So like one of the types of beers that I really enjoy is a white ale, which has obvious citrus notes. And I always assume that's because there is some citrus being infused in there. Now, is that all coming from hops as well?
It depends on the beer, depends on the product. Some hops are very well known to confer citrus flavors, citrus aromas, and characteristics. Some people do add zested orange or zested lemon.
Okay.
If you're at a microbrew level, it's easier, but if you're at an industrial brew level, they might be doing something else. They might be using a syrup or a tincture. It depends. For us, we did not add orange or lemon or any zesting. What's happening with Golden Crush is definitely that big, bright, hoppy character. We did torpedo this beer, so what that means is once it was finished brewing and it went to the fermenters, we put it into our hop torpedo and cycled it for, I think, 24 hours, pushing it through a bed of hops, extracting all those oils that are like rich and bright and juicy. You know, you're looking for the those big orange aromas and flavors. That's what I look for when I drink this, and that, like, cold summer beer for a hot day, this is the beer for me. Like, this is my summer drinking beer.
Yeah. No, and I think the citrus doesn't overwhelm the beer. I find sometimes with like fruit infused beer, you're just tasting the fruit and you're missing the beerness. But I never find that with like a pale ale, a white ale. I never find that with a white ale where there's those citrus notes, but it's still beer.
You're looking for complexity over one note or one beat?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think there was a period there where I think fruit-infused beers still seem popular, although kind of grapefruit beers or rattlers, is that the term?
Rattlers are popular.
They are becoming more popular, so I'm maybe seeing or experiencing less fruit-infused beers. In the first few that I tried when it was just kind of a new thing, there was fruit, but then there was still the complexity of the beer. And then as more and more hit the market, it was like, wow, this just tastes like blueberries. Where's all of where's everything else going on in the beer? So I kind of, for a while there, fell out of love with it, but maybe other people have as well, because I don't see as much fruit beer in the market right now. I mean, that used to be the summer beer. You would go and everyone was selling fruit beer. But now it's rattlers or white ales.
That's what
I find I'm experiencing more in the summer anyway.
So you were saying your tastes have kind of changed over time. In terms of IPA, you said you're kind of shifting. You're discovering.
Yes. Yep.
Do you think you'd add this to your summer recommends, or are you going to hold back and stick to something
No,
else?
I would certainly recommend this. And you would probably know this more than I, but when I ever talk to beer with maybe not the beer connoisseurs, IPAs are usually frowned upon because of a supposed or a perceived bitterness. And maybe, there's all sorts of different IPAs, and maybe some of them are really bitter. But for me, the change happened actually when I was sent on a beer drinking course, and it was all about glassware. And we were told to experience this IPA in, this regular pint glass, and yeah, it tasted about what I would expect, and I didn't really enjoy it. And then we were told to put it in this different type of glass and to try it, and it was a different experience, and then we were told why.
What was the shape of the glass?
I don't remember. I know there was 4 types. And I can't remember which one was the IPA glass, but it was something to do with the.
Was it long fluted beer?
I think it was.
Did it have a bell with?
It wasn't the bell, I don't think, but it was something to do with the way the surface tension and the head was capturing what was going on in the beer underneath, so that when you finally kind of broke through, the way that it was dispersed, it gave you a different experience. Now, in my opinion, good beer is going to taste good no matter what you put it in, right? Would you agree? But that's the first time that I really had a very positive experience with a IPA.
I don't think that's uncommon for people who've never tasted an IPA before to just absolutely hate it. The first IPA I ever had, I thought it was awful. I was like, you guys just served me poison. But over the years, I wouldn't say I'm an IPA aficionado or a go-to IPA kind of guy, but I've learned and discovered some types of IPA that I enjoy.
Yeah, I don't think IPA is my favorite type of beer, and all of the IPA that I've experienced and enjoy, I like to drink it over time because there's so much going on after you have a swallow that you don't pound it, right? So that's another reason why I like it. You can take your time with it.
You're trying to get the most out of every ounce.
That's right. It's not like a Corona where you just kill a bottle in 5 seconds because there's nothing going on. It's just cold.
I would say of all of Rebellion's beers, Golden Crush is probably my first or second choice. And that is an IPA, which to me would seem unusual, but I think it's that good, personally. It appeals to me.
Yeah.
So let's transition. Let's talk about comic books. What new books are you looking at this summer?
Well, there's a couple of things really interesting that are happening in comics. Now, that said, there's always, within a month, something new and exciting coming out. But the two big things that are happening right now in the comic world are happening to the two biggest comic publishers, DC Comics, home of Batman and Superman, etc., and Marvel Comics, home of X-Men, Captain America, etc. So over in the Marvel universe, Marvel is restarting, renumbering almost their entire line of comics. So, I mean, this sounds cliched, but it's a chance to check out new creative teams on books that you may have liked in the past and have fallen out of love with, or just lost kind of interest in over the course of your years. But what Marvel's really hoping for here is to bring back lapsed readers and to attract new readers who are probably honestly only know the Marvel Universe through their Marvel movies, and know the Marvel Universe comics are not like the movies, and nor should they be. But with renumbering and putting on big name creative teams, they're really hoping to experience big sales over the summer, because honestly they've kind of been lapsing. They've made some decisions over the last year or so that, you know, upset some fans, maybe didn't attract as many new fans as they had thought. So they're rethinking. One of the big things that happened to them too is that a man named Brian Michael Bendis, who is a writer and has been basically orchestrating the Marvel Universe for probably 10 plus years, he has left the Marvel Universe and he went and joined the competition over at DC Comics. So the other big event that's happening is that Brian Michael Bendis is beginning his run on Superman. Now, Superman is a flagship character. I would argue that he might be the most recognizable comic book character in the known world.
Yeah.
But his comic has been pretty crappy for as long as I can remember. In the store, sales of Spider-Man far exceed sales of Superman. Superman, in my opinion, should be a flagship title for DC. I'm sure they feel the same way. Batman sells fantastic. Superman does not. And now they're putting, you know, a very experienced, a very knowledgeable writer on Superman. And I bet DC is hoping that it becomes a flagship book, right up there with Batman. And I'm hoping so too. I mean, Superman is such a hard character to write, I would think, because he's the Boy Scout, he's Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, He is so powerful. How do you challenge the guy emotionally? How do you challenge him physically? You know, the pessimist in me thinks no one can make him interesting. But I'm hoping that Brian Michael Bendis can, and I bet DC as well, because I suspect they had to throw a lot of money at him to court him away from Marvel Universe. Now, in the press, Brian Michael Bendis has said, you know, he's done so much at Marvel that in his life now, it's as a writer, it's time for a new challenge for him. And I can respect that. To me, that sounds authentic. But he's not doing it for free, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's contracts involved there.
Well, I feel like I'm kind of allergic to Marvel and DC. That's something I did when I read when I was younger. But now I'm looking for more interesting titles. I'm looking for different kinds of stories. So I'm not saying that I'll never read a Marvel comic book again, but they're not working for me anymore.
No, and you're not the only one. And I think that's something that DC and Marvel are probably experiencing as well. There are so many different options in comics. If you want to read autobiographical stories, you can. If you want to read true historical stories, you can. If you want to read horror, you can. Every genre you can think of that exists in movies or novels, it exists in comics. But getting into comics can be an overwhelming experience because you don't know who the writers are, the artists are, you don't know who the characters are. So people that sometimes seek out comics for the first time, all they know is what they've experienced through other media. So the Marvel Universe movies, as an example.
Well, that's kind of why I rely on you.
Yeah.
I come into the store and I'm like, hey, what are you reading lately? What do you think I might like?
Yeah, no, and I think the comic shop, the local comic shop has always been a community building place. And you said you've been going there for 20 years, and we have customers that are probably there as often or even longer. But I think similar to that, what the comic shop offers is expertise. I mean, our staff and myself, we read comics. We don't all read the same comics, so you're going to get different recommendations from different readers. And yeah, you can get comics, from Comixology or digital services or Amazon, but that personal touch, being able to ask someone what's new, to ask someone, well, who is this writer I keep hearing about? Or what's this thing, saga, I keep hearing about? There's something to be said for that. And, if and when the Marvel Universe movies stop getting made, or we can only hope that DC stops making superhero movies and does us all a favor and just realizes, we can't do this. We're just going to stop. When that stuff happens, there are still going to be people that just want to read comics, good comics, regardless of the genre. And that's why it's important to support your local comic shop, because that's where you find them. And it's in those community-based shops that they're the backbone of the industry. So Marvel and DC are having these big changes, which is why I mention them, because they are big changes. But there are so many good comics out on any given month. Every week we get new comics, and every week there is probably a handful of titles that would be on my recommended reading list.
What do you recommend?
So recommending is, I take it very seriously in that I just don't always go to the stuff that I like. I always ask a series of questions. So what comics have you read before? What writers do you like? What artists do you like? And if they have no experience with comics, I always go to, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of TV shows do you watch? So if they really like horror, well then I have instantly a handful of horror titles that I would always recommend. If all they watch is Game of Thrones, well, there's some pretty epic comic series that have as much intrigue and violence as Game of Thrones, as an example. But there's always a few safe recommendations. And those safe recommendations are just these wide, appealing comics. And they often have the name Brian K. Vaughan associated with them. Yeah. He is a writer who's been around for a number of years. He created Why the Last Man, which is probably one that a lot of people know because it's been over for a few years now. He is the writer behind the hugely popular Saga, which is enjoyed by adult readers only, obviously. It's very mature.
Saga is kind of nuts.
Yeah, but it enjoys a very strong female and male readership.
Okay.
Something newer that he's working on is Paper Girls.
I love that one.
which is one of my recommendations for the summer. So it's written by Brian K. Vaughan, and the artist is Cliff Chiang. It's about four 12-year-old paper girls in the 1980s suburbia who end up traveling through time. So the setup there is that it's the morning of Halloween night, and these four paper girls meet on their route, and then they find themselves having to flee from bullies. And they take refuge in a basement where they find what is a time machine. And at that same moment that they find the time machine, their little suburban town is attacked by some strange force from the future. And then the girls end up traveling through the past and through the future, including some very kind of poignant moments when they interact with their future selves.
When I was reading Paper Girls, it kind of reminded me of a cross between E.T., It, Turbo Kid, like all these classic 1980s movies, Goonies.
It is. It has that similar feel where you have these normal kids experiencing fantastic things. They're in danger, but they never are like in mortal danger. Almost seems like at times they're enjoying it, they're having fun. Like that's one of the things I always liked about Goonies that you mentioned, is that, you know, these kids are experiencing dangerous things and they react and they're scared. But man, you can tell they're also having a really good time while they're doing it, which I think is a fantastic way to capture childhood. It's a scary, hellish thing, but yeah, we had a lot of fun as kids too. One of the things I like about Paper Girls is that it's a very brisk read. Brian K. Vaughan does not weigh you down with preteen angst. He doesn't weigh you down with heavy pseudo-scientific technical babble. He's able to deliver these very thoughtful moments that can define the character, but he can do it with just a few lines of dialogue. Amazing writing. And then for the scientific quote-unquote stuff, everything you need is in the art. Brian K. Vaughan doesn't have to explain anything. Cliff Chiang draws a time machine, and you know it's a time machine. That there is a giant robot that's piloted by people from the future. That's obvious. He doesn't need to tell you that because Cliff Chiang does such a great job of drawing it.
What else do you recommend?
Well, see, one of the things I had thought about in coming here was...
Because it seems like you love Paper Girls. We were like...
Yeah, I spent some time talking about Paper Girls. I agree. The thing about comics is you get me started, and then you sit me down, like, okay, we're going to be here for a while. When you invited me out, I was going to do light, quick reading for the summer.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, quite a few people, I think, still think of comics as a disposable medium, a read it and toss it kind of thing. But comics can be remarkable stories that will stick with you. And then I thought, well, if we're talking about summer beer, this could be depressing, talking about nothing but heavy stories. So I decided to combine it. So one of the other books I want to talk about is a horror story called Harrow County, written by Colin Bunn and drawn by Tyler Crook. And I really like the idea of summertime reading. You're by an open window or you're on a covered patio and it's raining and you're just getting immersed in kind of a creepy story. And Harrow County is a story for people that like horror, that want to be creeped out, but they don't want to be overwhelmed by gore and ultraviolence. It's the story of Emmy, who comes to learn that she has a connection with the ghosts and monsters that haunt the countryside. And in the very first beginning of the story, she learns what that connection is, and it just goes from there. Tyler Crook is able to creep you out with beauty.
I love the artwork in that one.
Yeah.
The watercolor is really
The watercolors,
unconventional.
yes.
It's gorgeous to look at. I could find myself turning the pages back and forth, going, "Wow, I'm not just enjoying the story. This art is spectacular."
Yeah, I find with comics, if the writing is good, I read it really fast because I'm so engaged. But there are comics for sure, and Harrow County is one of them, where then I go back and I pore over the art. For example, the title page, Harrow County, for every issue of Harrow County is just this beautiful rendered piece of watercolor art where Harrow County is hidden in the natural landscape of the South. And every time he does it, it's a thing of just beauty and wonder. And then you have a skinless kid running around, which is creepy. Or I don't know how far you've read, Matt, but the bog monster that comes out of the bog because he's looking for bones. That is just so creepy. But Harrow County is the kind of horror that actually my kids read. And it's not a kid's book, but I'm of the opinion that it's okay for kids to be scared at times. But in Harrow County, they're never scared in a damaging way.
That's interesting. So it's like a manageable challenge.
Yes.
They're confronting fear without being harmed by it.
Yeah, so like that bog monster, for instance, if you remember, like when it comes out of the bog, it's this horrifying thing, but it's a lost soul. So you get this moment of shock and awe, and you're like, oh, that's gross, that's foul, Emmy's in danger, and then you learn about it, and you feel sadness and loneliness. And man, what a feeling that is when you're hit with the shock of the creep, and then you come to feel sad for a monster. That's just because of the writing and because of the art. And that's what my kids really enjoy. They get oh, look how creepy that is. But he just needs a friend. Like, I mean, that's kind of simplifying it. But it's a very complex type of horror. So that's my second pick. I got one more if we have time.
Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, I was going to do light, and then I wanted to do heavy, and then I didn't want to do either. So I'm going to end up with a book that gives you the best of both worlds, and it's Kaiju Max by Xander Cannon. It is one of the most colorful comics being published today. It's filled with an array of eye-catching, colorful character designs. They're all monsters called kaiju, kind of inspired by a history of monster movies. Every page is full of just these little visual delights. So for instance, the kaiju, they smoke smokestacks, or they lounge across a whole mountain as a bed. Every page just has just so many little clever visual things. But it's also very heavy because all of these kaiju are prisoners. They're actually on an island prison for monsters, and it's overpopulated with all of these different factions that are vying for power. So for instance, you have the Zillas, which are all like kind of Godzilla, giant lizard type creatures, and the cryptids, which are all monsters from myth. So you have some of these baddest of the bad prisoners, and then you have a guy like Electrogar, who got captured and sent to prison while he was out looking for food for his kids. And then you also have stories told about the human guards that have to man this prison, and they all have these Ultraman-style power suits that make them giant so they can deal with the prisoners.
So they have a big fight with Godzilla?
Yeah, well, they don't want to fight. They want to run a well-controlled prison. So some of the humans are kind, some of them are corrupt, some of them are involved, for instance, with drug dealing. So human toxic waste can affect some monsters like drugs would affect humans.
Oh.
Yep. There's actually a whole monster colony on the moon.
So it's like the Stanley Milgram experiment with monsters.
Yeah, it is Oz, the TV show Oz from HBO with monsters. I guarantee you that there is no comic being published today that's like Kaiju Max, and not in my experience. It's full of hard-hitting social commentary about prison systems and how we treat people that get out of prison. There's this really great story where we see a monster that's been released back into civilization. And he's this giant monster, and he's helping humans on a construction site. And he's got this rapport with these humans that he's working with. And then after the shift is over, he's like, you guys want to come back to my crib and hang out? And the humans obviously don't want to, and they just tear down this monster. So you got this massive monster walking home sad because he has no friends. It's just, and he can't get a job, and his foreman's always on him. So you got these great social commentary, you got fantastic monster designs, you got visual gags, and honest to God, there is a Shakespeare-inspired, infused gangster rap stage production that plays out in the prison, which is a commentary on prison life. and it is probably one of the most stunning pieces of writing that I've read in comics recently. I'm like, this monster has a stage production, and he's rapping, and yet he's obviously telling a Shakespearean tragedy with monster characters. And it has, honest to God, some of the most heart-rending moments I've read in comics as well. Xander Cannon has won an Eisner Award for this series. I only sell one issue when it comes out, and that goes to me. But the trade paperbacks, I'm happy to say, are slowly gathering steam. If you want to be challenged and you want to see how comics can do whatever the hell they want, read Kaiju-Max.
It kind of sets the tone for getting into a medium that people might have never tried before.
Yeah, like if you think comics are the disposable medium that don't have anything much to offer, I challenge you to read Kaiju-Max. And it's not going to be for everyone because the artwork looks like a cartoon.
So it's like a blue rare steak disguised as a chicken nugget.
Yeah, oh man, that's a good, yeah, I like that. I'll use that.
When I was thinking about it yesterday, I wanted to bug you a little bit. The one comic book that I've gotten my wife to read, start to finish, is Fables. And I felt that was a real game changer for a lot of people. And I kind of wanted to bug you about that a little bit. Get you to tell me a little bit about your experiences, because you have a different perspective than I do.
Yeah, well, you're going to hit me in the feels here, Matt, and you don't know this, so don't apologize, but Fables is one of the comics that my mom and I read. And my mom unfortunately passed away before she was able to finish Fables. And I have to admit that I have never finished it, because whenever I look at it, I get sad.
Oh.
But Fables, so here's something about stories, Matt, and one of the reasons why I love comics and all stories is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what culture you identify with, we can always connect with each other through stories. And my mom and I, through distance, we didn't live in the same city, whenever we would chat, we would usually chat about what we're reading. So that's why stories are special, I think, because they bridge gaps. Fables is still, it's been finished for a number of years, and it's still, people still come looking for it. But when it came out, it was a game changer because Fables is basically all of your fairy tale characters that you probably experienced as a child, grown up and presented in an adult way. So you have all of these fairy tale characters that are exiled to our world, and they live in a closed community. And all of the weird animal characters live on a place called the farm, because they're not allowed off the farm because they're animals.
And they would freak.
And they don't like that. And the writer Bill Willingham was able for many years, that comic is very long running, to tell these amazing complex stories with fairy tale characters, which, to be honest, you know, there weren't a lot of stories about these fairy tales, and they were very simple, and they all told stories. So these weren't complex characters he had to work with, but he turned them into these complex characters you could identify with. And I think a lot of people got into it because it was like, wow, Pinocchio is a boy with a man's mind now. So what's that going to be like? Big B Wolf is the sheriff of the Fables. How does that work? Red Riding Hood runs the farm. You know, the farm animals, they rise up in revolt in Volume 2, right? Because they don't want to be, they're thinking creatures. They shouldn't be treated like literally, they should not be treated like animals. Fables, Why the Last Man, they are like the Saga, the Paper Girls of these days.
They're fantastic. I finished Fables, and I actually read it through a second time. It's really bittersweet. He really takes the opportunity to say goodbye to the characters. In terms of all the series I've ever read, it's probably one of the most complete, satisfying, if bittersweet.
He brought it to the end on his terms, so he had time to end it and give you the farewell that you needed. And I think it's important because as readers, we invest a lot of time and money in these series. So to not be able to say goodbye, I think, is a detriment to the industry, to the story. So I'm very happy to hear, Matt, that Fables allows you to say goodbye, because I know when I finally get to read it, it'll be like saying goodbye to my mom again. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. My condolences.
no, it's appreciated. It's been a few years now, but it's a loss that is always there behind you. So, and if that's too personal for the
No,
thing, and I don't mind,
That's okay. That's
it's
cool.
Me right in the field.
yeah, well, it's
Lisa's over here having a couple tears.
yeah, no, it's like I have them. They're all on the shelf, and I have them all, and it's like I look at them, and I just can't do it yet. I mean, I'll get there.
Fair
I'll
enough.
get there, but
Yeah.
healing takes time, and I think that'll be a step.
Chad, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come down and chat with us.
No, this has been a fantastic experience. I enjoy Rebellion. I enjoy talking about comics. Thanks for having me out. It's been a real pleasure.
Rebels, I really, really encourage you to come down to Comic Readers in downtown Regina. Come bug Chad. Open up a folder. Get a subscription. He'll make you a few good recommendations. And I want to thank you for tuning in this week. If you want to find more about the latest news about Rebellion Brewing, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Untapped. Thank you for joining the Rebellion.
Oh, come on, man.